Hello there guys. In this video I'm going to be trying out a natural metal finish using these metal colour paints that were sent to me by Gaahleri. Gileri have a range of 24 primary colours, which you can see here, as well as some mecha colours and some auto colours, plus the metal colours which I feature in this video. And if you are interested in any of these paints, there are links in the description below, along with discount codes for both Amazon and Gaahlerie's own website. And I believe they are also bringing out a set of military colours in the near future. All of these paints are marketed as high-performance water-based acrylics. Acrylic paints, of course, are supposed to be safer than enamels or lacquers, although ultimately you don't want to be breathing in any paint vapours or fumes. Personally, I always wear a mask when I'm painting, and I always make sure that I use an extraction booth as well. I did notice though that the smell from these paints was essentially absent, certainly compared with the Tamiya acrylics which I normally use and which I normally thin with their lacquer thinner. As you can see, we've got a box of 12 metal colours, all airbrush ready, covering zirconium black, stainless steel, copper, gunmetal, silver, scorch gold, tungsten steel, aluminium, champagne gold, titanium alloy, red copper and flashy gold. Rather than painting spoons or some random pieces of styrene, I thought I'd break out this Revell Razor Crest and give the paints a proper test. Hopefully this should allow me to compare the various colours, test out the primer and the varnishes which were also sent to me, and test out how the paints stand up against masking and weathering. But of course, before I could do that, I had to build the kit. The Razor Crest is a 2021 release from Revell in 1/72nd scale, which makes it just over 30 cm or 12 inches long when it's fully built up. The standard Revell instructions take us through building the interior first, and despite the amount of detail, there's a surprisingly small number of parts. The engines have a lot of external detail, but are primarily made up of two halves which clamp together. The internal floors are large single pieces, and even the hull itself is only two pieces. Here you can see that I've dry fitted the cockpit. Everything fits really nicely here with tabs and slots to keep it aligned. This rear compartment won't be visible in the final model unless we modify that middle door there and actually open it up. That's not really an option in the kit, but I just cut it away. We also get the first ever space toilet that I've built, which again, if you follow the instructions, can be completely enclosed and hidden, but for which I left the door off. You can also see here how the interior builds up as a box, which will then just slot into the outer shell. The instructions show you how to paint the interior in the official colours, which are quite dark. I decided I would prefer a lighter interior so I had the chance of actually seeing something, so I went for a grey colour, and I simply went for the grey which I had the most of and which I have used least often, which is this Aggressor Grey from AK Real Colours. Likewise, the console in the cockpit is supposed to be a green colour. I went for AK Real Colours AMT4 green, which is a Soviet colour from World War II, and I'm unlikely to use again, so I may as well use up the paint. As I mentioned, we do get a lot of detail on the interior, and this was painted using Vallejo model colours. I'm not really following any kind of paint guide here, I'm just painting things a colour that I think looks good. I did paint the cockpit controls and the lights in the side of the main cargo bay, before realising that the decal sheet included decals for those parts. Here you can see the extra visibility that that removed door now gives us into the rear compartment. I don't know what these storage bins or lockers are for, but I had a bit of fun putting some green and red status lights on the front of them. Our interior then slots together. The cargo bay should be visible through those two side doors and from the rear door. That then drops into the exterior hull piece, and then the top of the hull goes on, like so. Thankfully, all of the clear parts can be fitted from the outside, which makes fitting and masking much easier, and replacement if they fall out. As you can see, we can't see a great deal of the interior. Perhaps I should have put an LED or something in there. There would be space at the back of that top deck. As I masked including the clear parts, one of the things I forgot to do was to add the side doors when I put the two hull halves together, and that would come back to cause me problems later. Building up the engines, there are inserts at the front and rear which need to go in before the two halves go together, and because of the recesses they create, that means they need to be painted before they are added. So with that in mind, I painted them in the gloss black primer that Gileri supplied to me. I'll talk more about the texture in a moment, but suffice to say that is not the paint which is causing that texture there. At this point I had to decide which colours to use for the metal finish. I did want to try as many of these as possible, but of course the 3 gold variants probably wouldn't be relevant for this build, and the red copper likewise. So ultimately I went for the aluminium as the primary coat for the entire Razor Crest. I used the titanium alloy for the exhaust nozzles, tungsten steel for some details, stainless steel for the front of the engine intakes, gunmetal for the guns, silver for some of the hydraulic parts, and a little bit of the zirconium black for details and for part of the engine intakes as well. This is the zirconium black on the intake. You can see it's gone down really well here. The texture is actually the texture in the plastic, and the entire Razor Crest does have a bit of a sort of a grainy texture all over it that even primer can't really hide. And of course a metal finish is going to emphasize any of that. As you can see, it's gone down quite well. I did go a little bit over the top on the second one here, and I've got a bit of a run where I simply sprayed it a bit too thick. But in general, I didn't have to be ultra careful with putting these down. With some metal colours you really have to build them up very, very faintly, otherwise you get runs and all kinds of problems, but these were quite tolerant of my airbrushing incompetence. These are the feet of the landing gear, which were painted in the titanium alloy colour. And then here is the landing gear leg painted in silver. And then finally we have the tungsten steel for those exhausts. That's also got a lovely sort of silvery bluish tint to it. All of those colours were airbrushed straight out of the bottle, but I did also want to see if they would brush paint. So again, straight out of the bottle and onto the brush I have the titanium alloy colour, which I'm just painting this intake fan with. And then so that I could say that I've used it, I took a couple of drops of the red copper and brushed in what I take to be sort of an engine glow. One problem with this kit is the seam lines in the two engine halves. They're very pronounced, and they are quite hard to sand away because of the detail that's around them. In a couple of cases I sort of cheated by taking some styrene and sticking it over the seam line to be another sort of greebly on the exterior of the engines. These are the primers which Gaahleri supplied to me. White and grey, both in matte, and then black in both matte and gloss. I've never airbrushed primer before. I've always used either Tamiya rattle cans or the Halford's car primer, but I really could get into airbrushing primer. Oddly, it seems more convenient. It's easier to get into all those nooks and crannies on the model, and it seems a lot more efficient as well. You're not spraying a lot of paint past your model into the airbrush spray booth. Since building this model, I have also tried these primers with other paints on top of them, both Tamiya acrylics and AK Real Colour acrylics, both thinned with lacquer thinner, and they both went down on top of this primer really well, which of course was really good to see. Gileri did also supply some airbrush thinner and some cleaner. I didn't use the thinner at all because I didn't need to. I did try the cleaner, but it wasn't really as strong and as aggressive as I like, so it did really struggle to clean the airbrush a bit, and I did resort to Tamiya lacquer thinner to get out some of the more stubborn bits of paint. Here is the Razor Crest after a coat of the gloss primer, and again it has got that grainy texture on the top of it, somewhat less so on the sides. That is the plastic, it's not the paint itself. It's just a natural sort of grain in the plastic, which is a bit annoying really. I then gave the entire ship a coat of the aluminium colour, and you can see there on the side the plastic is a lot smoother than the top. But I think that paint overall has gone down really well. No runs, no overspraying, really tolerant of a range of PSIs, pressures in the airbrush. I didn't have to take the extreme care that you do have to take with some paints. Equally, I painted the engines in the same colour, aluminium. You can see that line there, that seam line is still a bit visible in places. I do feel like the paint has a good level of gloss as well. It's not blindingly shiny, although it is quite bright under my lights, but it's also not so dull that it's just a grey colour. And although it's not finished yet, you can see here on the dry fitted model the various colours with the aluminium on the body and the various colours on the front and the back of the engine. Next up we need those iconic damaged yellow stripes on the side of the Razor Crest. We do get decals for that, but after looking at them I decided I would paint this, and that would also give me a chance to test out how durable these paints were when it comes to masking. So I used the decals as a rough guide, masked up the kit in Tamiya masking tape. There's no varnish on top of the paint at this point, it's just straight paint onto the primer. Originally I was going to use some of this Humbrol mask gold to get the damage effects, but when I opened it, it had more or less turned solid. So I moved to plan B, which was this AK Worn Effects acrylic fluid, which essentially is very similar to hairspray but just a lot more expensive. So that was sprayed lightly over the stripes, followed by some Tamiya XF3 yellow thinned with Tamiya lacquer thinner. With the masking tape removed, the stripes look quite nice and neat, but then I come along with my rough paintbrush, dipped in water to dissolve that Worn Effects fluid and remove the paint. It's really good fun going to town on things like this, making them really worn and damaged. I've got to say as well, that paint held up really well. Nothing came off with the masking tape, nothing came off with the Worn Effects, even though I was scrubbing quite hard in certain areas. Once that had all dried, I turned to the varnishes that Gileri sent me. Matte, of course, is not really appropriate for this model, but I don't think gloss is either, so I settled with the semi-gloss varnish. It's surprisingly hard to see a clear varnish go down on a reflective metal coat, but I did cover the whole model in it. And then I proceeded to do some detail painting on the ship. I think with hindsight maybe I should have masked off some of the panels and painted them in slightly different colours, like I did on my recent B17 or my P47, but for some reason I just didn't do that. I did however paint these grills at the back, as well as some of the details on the separate parts such as the landing gear. Believe it or not, we do have 3 different metal colours here on this individual leg. And of course the Gaahleri gunmetal colour for the 2 large guns at the front, which I supplemented with a little bit of dark steel pigment, just sort of gently buffed into it once the paint had dried. Then it was time to move on to the weathering. I started with this enamel black panel liner from Ammo, and started with some of the deep recesses on the back of the ship, sort of engine related details I guess these are. I put these on quite thick, with the enamel straight from the bottle. I found the enamel didn't flow very well through the panel lines for some reason, so I moved to a sepia oil paint thinned with odourless thinner, and gave the entire model a panel line pin wash. The Razor Crest is really quite dirty in the TV series, so I wasn't too worried about any excess, and generally speaking I just dragged it backwards with a brush to simulate dirt and grime flying over the surface. It is actually quite hard to see in my lights, but I think it looks quite good already, and that's just the first pass with the oils. The next step was applying some oil paints directly, unthinned, particularly around the engines, and streaking them backwards to get this sort of grime and oil and the staining build up there. Initially this was done with a brown colour, I forget which one it was, shadow brown I think. I also thinned that paint a bit more and speckled it over the entire model, hopefully leading to a slightly grimy look without having big splotches of oil paint anywhere. I gave all of that 24 hours to dry before coming back with a darker black oil paint and adding some extra engine grease, oil stains, etc. To be honest, I probably could have gone a lot further on this and made it even dirtier, but I was quite happy with how it was at this point. For the exhaust nozzles, they are painted in that original tungsten steel colour, and then I tried to add some Tamiya clear blue and clear orange to it to give a sort of heat stained effect. With that done, I'll let you decide how effective that was, and the final touch for that was a small amount of black pigment right on the end of the nozzles. We do get this small Mandalorian figure, but for whatever reason I didn't paint it and include it. I think mainly because if the ship is landed, it doesn't make much sense to have him sat down in the cockpit. And with that done, my Razor Crest was complete. So there we go guys, that was my build of the Revell Razor Crest with a natural metal finish, painted almost entirely with the Gileri metal colours range. Of course, when you receive products for review, it's very easy to sing their praises because you got them for free, or at least come across as if you're doing that. So with that in mind, I think it's best just to let the results of the paints speak for themselves. With the Gaahleri primer as a base, those metal paints have done a great job of sticking to the model. A nice metal finish with the right amount of sheen, and the paints have been really strong. They've withstood masking, even without a varnish. They've withstood weathering, including the odourless thinner, and of course the weathering with the chipping effects as well. There's certainly a nice range of colours there too. Of the 6 or 7 that I used on this model, they're all very clearly different. And although I can't imagine as many times when I'll be using champagne gold or scorch gold or flashy gold, there may be some niche use cases, and certainly the paints that I did use here would come in handy over a lot of projects. I seem to have done a few natural metal finishes recently. A while ago I did the P47 Thunderbolt, and if I remember correctly I did that in a base coat of Vallejo paint. I also did the B17G in natural metal finish, and in fact in my last video I did the P38 Lightning, where I used the Tamiya Rattlecan AS12 to less than stellar results. I didn't really intend those builds to end up being a comparison of different natural metal finishes, but you can see them here now, and you can look at the videos yourself and see what you think. As I mentioned, I have used the Gaahleri primer on a couple of other projects since filming this one, and I am looking forward to their military colours when they come out. I'd like to say thank you again to Gaahleri for sending me these paints to test. Thanks to you for watching this video, and if you are interested in the paints, there are links and discount codes in the description below. And of course, extra special thanks to my Patreon supporters and YouTube members. They've had a few sneak previews of my upcoming videos, and therefore they know what will be featured in next week's video, which will be a military subject. I hope to see you again in that video, and until then I want to say thank you again for watching, and have fun modelling.